Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ananta Center. For all of you coming here for the first time, a very big welcome. And for all of you who are coming back, please keep coming back. We're starting a series of strategic dialogues with South Korea on geopolitics, technology, economics, and everything that matters to us in the 21st century. This would be it's a 1.5 track dialogue, and we've got a fabulous set of speakers. We're going to start the proceedings with two opening remarks by the ambassador and by the Secretary East, who will deliver a keynote address, which will be followed by our panel discussion. Ambassador, if I may request you.
Good morning to everyone. Namaste. Honorable Secretary of MEA, Mr. Jaideep Majumdar, Mr. Lee Sung-wan, Director General for Strategy and Policy Planning of MOPA Korea, and Dr. Indrani Bakshi, CEO of Ananta Center, Attorney General S.L. Narasimhan, Center for Air Power Studies, Professor Raja C. Mohan, Institute of South Asian Studies, and Dr. Song Kyung-jin, country representative of the Asia Foundation in Korea. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the inaugural event of the Korea-India 1.5 Track Forum hosted by the Korean Embassy in India, in collaboration with our esteemed partner, the Ananta Center. While we have frequently facilitated intergovernmental consultations and business forums involving key stakeholders from both nations, the need for a platform where civil society experts, journalists, academics, and scholars can engage in strategic dialogue alongside government officials has long been recognized. Today, we take a significant step in addressing that need with the launch of this forum, the first of many initiatives in partnership with the Ananta Center. I extend my heartfelt thanks to the Center for its outstanding efforts in organizing this forum and for its unwavering dedication to strengthening collaboration between Korea and India. We are privileged to have a distinguished panel of opinion leaders and policymakers with us today, whose vast experience and insights will undoubtedly enrich our discussions. I deeply appreciate your presence and eagerly anticipate your contributions on how we can further enhance Korea-India relations. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past 5 decades, the Korea-India relationship has blossomed into a special strategic partnership grounded in shared values and a common vision. As the Indo-Pacific region emerges as a focal point in our bilateral relationship, the importance of our partnership has never been more pronounced. In this era marked by complex global challenges, the strategic environment of the Indo-Pacific is evolving rapidly, with the region's geopolitical, geoeconomic, and geotechnological significance. The world's attention is increasingly focused on promoting peace, security, and prosperity here. The United States Indo-Pacific strategy has shifted from a traditional hub-and-spoke alliance system to a lattice-like strategic architecture, a formidable web of alliances. In this context, solidarity among like-minded nations has become essential, as security issues in one country can have far-reaching global implications. Moreover, global challenges such as climate change, energy transitions, pandemics, and the digital economy require a collective response. In this light, Korea has embarked on its journey to become a global pivotal state. Our Indo-Pacific strategy outlines a roadmap for expanding proactive engagement beyond the Korean Peninsula and offers a blueprint for strengthening partnerships to uphold a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. Korea is committed to playing an active role in establishing new norms by participating in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, IPEF, and fostering cooperation with the Quad. India, as the world's largest democracy and rapidly growing economy, is solidifying its position as a global power. Under its G20 presidency, India prioritized amplifying the voice of the Global South and demonstrated proactive leadership. India has also been strengthening connections with regional partners through initiatives such as the Quad in the Indo-Pacific and the I2U2 in the Middle East, while carefully maintaining its defense industry cooperation with Russia. Ladies and gentlemen, as Korea and India continue to enhance their regional strategies and global presence, it is imperative that we further strengthen our bilateral relationship within this broader context. This timely and relevant dialogue comes at a critical juncture as we navigate an increasingly uncertain world together. The theme of today's forum, Navigating Global Uncertainty, Redefining Korea-India Relations, is especially pertinent as our two nations attempt to reimagine their relationship amid the evolving geopolitical and geoeconomic dynamics. Having celebrated last year the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties between our two countries, this year marks the beginning of the next 50 years of our partnership. It is an opportune moment to redefine and elevate our relationship to new heights. While our collaboration has traditionally been driven by bilateral efforts, particularly in the economic domain, we must now try to broaden our expectations and mutual benefits within a global framework. And by identifying areas of convergence and fostering a shared perspective, we can create our unique latticework of cooperation within each other's regional strategies. Both India and Korea have a rich tradition of latticework. India's iconic architectural heritage, including Taj Mahal and Hawa Mahal, and Korea's traditional homes with their distinctive wooden lattice doors, known as 문창살. In this era of global uncertainty, I hope that Korea and India can craft their own intricate latticework, becoming steadfast partners in bilateral, regional, and multilateral efforts. I'm confident that today's discussions will generate fresh ideas and valuable insights, laying a strong foundation for our bilateral ties to flourish over the next 50 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Chang. May I request Secretary East Jaideep Mazumdar to deliver his keynote address.
Thanks. I'll adjust it. Very good morning to you all. Thank you, Ambassador Chang, for those thoughtful words. I am delighted to speak today at the Ananta Center, the first time I've been here with you. This center, I believe, has played an important role as a platform for dialogue on topics that matter for India's development and national interest. I thank Indrani for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you and with this galaxy of thought leaders who make up the panel today. It was in 1993 that Prime Minister Narasimha Rao paid a visit to Korea, the first ever by an Indian Prime Minister. India was a very different country then, and so was Korea. As a young officer drafted in to help with the visit from Hong Kong, where I was then learning Chinese, I have seen our two countries then and now. And in the space of a generation, both countries have changed unrecognizably. And today, our bilateral relationship and the role in the world are also unrecognizable from what it was in 1993. And certainly, the world is more complicated, and our common neighborhood is also more complicated than what it was then. The challenges that we face are complex and multifaceted, with no easy answers or solutions. Whether it is the economic downturns triggered by financial or epidemiological crisis, or the shifting geopolitical landscapes that create risks and impact institutions, or the disruptive pace of technological advancements which has changed human existence as we know it, it has never been more critical to forge convergences and like-minded partnerships. We have had real illustrations in recent times of just how unpredictable the global environment can be. In 2019, we witnessed the outbreak of COVID-19, which reshaped our life and work, brought home our shared vulnerabilities, and had a huge toll on human life. The conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, the tensions in the South China Sea and the Korean Peninsula, the events in Myanmar, in Afghanistan, in Sri Lanka, and in Bangladesh are reminders of how the world is in a state of constant flux. The India-RoK relationship is one which has immense potential to be an anchor for peace and stability and prosperity, and to help both actors navigate the sea of global uncertainty. Last year, as Ambassador reminded us, we celebrated 50 years of diplomatic relations. Our relations, of course, date back much earlier and even to antiquity, as you all know, in the legend of Princess Suriratna and of Ayodhya and King Kimsuro of 2000 years ago. Buddhism is a shared spiritual heritage, and both nations are recognized global powerhouses in the realm of soft power and cultural diplomacy, of which Ambassador Chang is a great practitioner himself. In contemporary times, the desire to bolster relations has acquired a strategic dimension. Our relations were elevated to special strategic partnership during the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Seoul in 2015. Prime Minister Modi had said during the visit, and I quote, "While we work to realize the Indian dream, we seek like-minded partners, and among them, we see the Republic of Korea as a truly natural partner," unquote. The construct of the Indo-Pacific for us, of a region that is free and open in the common pursuit of peace, progress, and prosperity, and with a principled commitment to the rule of law, RoK ticks all these boxes. President Yoon Suk-yeol's strategy for a free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region similarly looks at India as a prominent partner that shares similar values, has the largest population in the world, and tremendous economic potential. The ROK has a vision to become a global pivotal state, one that contributes diplomatically, economically, and strategically beyond Asia. And in that framework, India plays a prominent part. The convergence in our visions is at the heart of our strategic partnership and creates a conducive environment for intensifying engagement across a range of sectors such as trade, investment, energy, infrastructure, manufacturing, defense, and technology. India today is the world's fifth largest economy and leading player in startups and innovation. ROK is an advanced economy and has the leadership position across sectors such as IT, automotive, electronics, infrastructure, manufacturing, and biotechnology. There are economic complementarities which provide immense opportunities for partnership. In December last year, the South Korean Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy announced its 3050 strategy initiative, which was designed to stabilize South Korea's key supply chains and reduce dependence on any single country to less than 50% by 2030. This provides another basis for India and the ROK to explore partnerships in a stabilized and more diversified industrial supply chain. Significantly, as Korea goes through its challenges with a low fertility rate and aging population, India's demographic dividend and Make in India for the World strategy become perfectly aligned, whether it is in electronics or shipbuilding, beauty products, or the animation industry. ROK was one of the first countries with which we signed a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. Korean companies have harnessed the business opportunities in India to produce goods for the global market and integrate India into their supply chains. Technology is a critical piece of our contemporary ties. India and the ROK have launched a trilateral technology dialogue along with the United States last year. The dialogue provides an excellent opportunity to concretize cooperation on critical and emerging technologies and captures the essence of our shared economic and security interests. We are also exploring collaboration between India and the ROK in the sector of green hydrogen and semiconductors through joint ventures and joint R&D projects. Additionally, we have attained a level of comfort and trust in our defense cooperation, whether through high-level exchanges, staff talks, joint R&D, or joint production and transfer of technology. There is an appreciation on both sides of key sensitivities as well as healthy exchange of information on the prevailing regional security environment. Various institutional dialogue mechanisms provide an opportunity for both sides to take stock of our defense partnership. In addition to the defense policy dialogue, we have the 2+2 dialogue at the Secretary Vice Minister level, which we hope to hold later this year, and the Joint Committee meeting on defense industries cooperation. Both sides signed a roadmap for defense industries cooperation to promote R&D and co-production in 2020. The collaboration between L&T and Korean business conglomerate Hanwha to jointly manufacture the K9 Vajra artillery guns in India is a notable outcome. Warm people-to-people exchanges lend vibrancy to our partnership. More than 100,000 Indians visited the ROK each year, drawn by the distinct cuisine, landscape, and notably the popularity of Korean pop culture. Similarly, India is a popular destination with more than 150,000 Koreans visiting India for tourism and business last year. There is a significant presence of Indians in Korea who work in the multinational companies and are also research students and faculty at top Korean universities. Even more than Our historical connect and our civilizational heritage, it is the reality of contemporary global uncertainty and the resultant common challenges and opportunities that will define our relations as we go forward. And while we can be happy with the state of our relations, it is imperative to set sight on the tremendous untapped potential that the relationship still holds as we navigate global uncertainty. And as we move into the world of AI and chips, battery and electric mobility, space and drones, clean tech and critical minerals, India and ROK have a broad spectrum of opportunities and complementary strengths that can propel us to an even higher level of engagement. As two democracies with rule of law and open market policies, two governments with a commitment to economic advancement and peaceful regional environment, and two of the world's most creative and ingenious peoples, India and ROK partnership can be a force multiplier by which we can benefit each other. India and Korea are well aligned politically and economically to respond to challenges of the global uncertainty. Right in the beginning, I had said our relations are unrecognizable from what they were 30 years ago. In conclusion, I can say with great certainty that the pace can only accelerate. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mazumdar. And thank you for those words, Ambassador Chung and Mr. Mazumdar. I think we've set the tone and the context for the panel discussion. If I may request the panelists to please come on stage. General Narasimhan, Rajamohan, Dr. Lee, and Dr. Song. This is welcome once again to our discussion. I think if we look at today's world, we are both India and South Korea both sit at geopolitical and geoeconomic intersections. The ambassador spoke of a lattice-like network of alliances, which is kind of evocative of the state that we find ourselves in. I'd say that we would be looking at 4 areas in which the geopolitical uncertainties that govern our modern world exists, and they would be geopolitics, geoeconomics and trade, technology, and values. A lot of these would not be subjects of a geopolitical discussion, but as we have seen, both values, technology, and the choices we make, the geopolitical choices we make, also govern our trading and economic relationships. Certainly, Korea feels a lot of this. India certainly feels a lot of this. I think both our keynote speakers referred to it. Korea certainly with the fact that it is a US treaty ally, but 25% of its trade is with China. Likewise, like India, however, Korea kept China out of its 5G network. but on semiconductors, you have a very close relationship. So we are in this lattice-like framework. But to talk about our topic today, which is literally the first of our series of strategic dialogues with Korea, which is navigating these global uncertainties and how we can redefine India-RoK relations going forward. If I may begin with Dr. Lee, if I may ask you to take the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Bakshi, but I do have to confess at the outset that I am without a doctoral degree, so just Mr. Lee would be fine.
Mr. Lee, to you.
Thank you, thank you. And I also have to say that I have the very unenviable task of having to navigate away from all the eloquent messages that have been already conveyed by the Secretary and our Ambassador. So allow me to put on my policy planning hat and perhaps be a little unconventional in terms of how I approach these issues. And so let me start by laying out briefly the key geopolitical and, as you've said, the geoeconomic challenges facing Korea's foreign policy. And it goes without saying that first and foremost, the most immediate challenge confronting Korea at the moment is the growing and all but existential threat posed by North Korea's ever-growing nuclear and missile arsenals. And sadly, this has recently been amplified by the growing strategic rapport between Russia and the North Koreans. And one has to say that it would be the height of irresponsibility to downplay the seriousness of the threat, the existential threat posed by North Korea's nuclear arsenals to the people of South Korea. And we can't just wish it away as defensive bluster, as some would have it, by seeking to speak on behalf of the North Korean motives. But at the same time, in terms of Korea's geopolitical outlook, it's also true and undeniable that over the decades and over the years, Korea's fixation, if you will, and the overwhelming imperative to deal with the North Korean threat has largely inhibited our ability to play a larger role on the global stage. So let me start there. And the second geopolitical challenge facing Korea is more generic in nature, and in fact, the repercussions can be felt all around the world. And that is, of course, the rise of China. And generic as it is, there are some unique aspects to the rise of China that are more or less idiosyncratic to Korea. And let me just highlight 2 points. The first is the fact that the sea dividing Korea and China at its shortest stretch, at its narrowest stretch, is only 190 kilometers. So there's only 190 kilometers between the Northern Theater Command overseeing China's military approach to the Korean Peninsula and South Korea and South Korea. So this body of water now is becoming increasingly crowded, increasingly dense, with the presence of more fishing trawlers, more vessels, more coastal vessels, more military warships as well in this very narrow band of water, stretch of water. So that obviously has some geopolitical implications as well. And earlier, the Secretary also mentioned the issue of semiconductors. And insofar as the US-China geoeconomic, geotechnological rivalry is fundamentally about semiconductors, one can say that Korea is very much at the vortex of that geotechnological competition for no other reason than the fact that Korea is the second largest producer of semiconductors in the world. We are home, as President Biden has often noted, to the single largest chip manufacturing fabs in the world. So there you have it. We are very much at the center of that geopolitical divide, and our companies very much feel that pressure on them in terms of how this widening rift between the two countries, the geopolitical powers, are affecting their interests. Third, and just to put it very briefly, the precarious state of the rules-based international order also impinges on Korea's geopolitical priorities as well. And this doesn't simply exist in the abstract. And I say this because Korea as we know it today would not have existed had it not been for those many countries that had stood up and pushed back against North Korea's aggression in 1950 to uphold the newly minted United Nations Charter, which prohibited outright aggression. And that's why countries came to our aid, not because they knew us, not because they had real interests in Korea, but because they fought to defend the sanctity of the rules-based order as enshrined in the newly minted UN Charter. Moreover, Korea's economic prosperity as we know it today also would not have been possible had it not been for the rules-based open international trading system underpinned by the GATT and the WTO that allowed Korea to pursue an export-driven model of growth. So in short, I think one can use an analogy to describe Korea's geopolitical situation by using the proverbial room with the 800-pound gorilla in a room. But the gorilla, or rather, one would say perhaps that a dragon would be more apt, but that gorilla is actually growing in size and stature. It's starting to destabilize the room. The edifice is starting to come apart. But for Korea, what's unique about this geopolitical picture is that we have this venomous rattlesnake between the gorilla and us. Yet our partners around the world look to us, our like-minded partners around the world look to us and say, we would like you to be less fixated on the rattlesnake itself, however venomous its tendons are growing, and focus more on handling the gorilla, because Korea's own size and stature is growing. So we would very much like you to contribute more to stabilizing the edifice. So Korea is being asked to do more, and this is where the Indo-Pacific strategy and the global geopolitical, the global federal state vision come into play. Whereas previous iterations of Korea's national strategy had sought to navigate Korea's way forward by looking from the inside out, by starting from the Korean Peninsula and then gradually working outwards. And by the time, if you have enough attention span left, you would also go to India and whatnot. So sadly, again, the overarching imperative of having to deal with North Korea preempted our ability to look more broadly to the globe. With the Indo-Pacific strategy, what has happened is that we are now, for the first time, looking from the outside in. We look at what kind of order we wish to see prevail in the Indo-Pacific, and the answer is very clear. We wish to see an order that is free of coercion, free of bullying, and free of unilateral changes to the status quo by force. And that is where our strategic goals are in alignment. So based on this Indo-Pacific strategy, we're forging various network partnerships, and as the ambassador has so eloquently noted, the various lattice work of partnerships around the world. We're building and strengthening existing partnerships with the United States, of course, are the centerpiece of our foreign policy. We're broadening and taking to new heights our trilateral partnership with the US and Japan, with NATO countries, G7 countries, IP4, and also other key partners in the Indo-Pacific, such as, of course, India, the Special Strategic Partnership, Canada, Australia. We're also broadening our horizons by strengthening partnerships with the Global South, whether it's Africa, Central Asia, or the Pacific Island countries. And we're also spearheading efforts to modernize the rules of the road for the 21st century, namely in terms of AI, for instance, the use of artificial intelligence in the military domain. Korea will in fact be hosting a very important conference 2 weeks from now to spearhead efforts to lay down the rules of the road for this very important topic. So what does all this mean for Korea and India? And I would simply note two parallels that are perhaps often overlooked. The first is that our two countries have very similar geopolitical, we're in a very similar geopolitical position. And I say this because just as Korea had the idiosyncratic challenge of that venomous rattlesnake, India likewise has its long-standing challenge from the northwest that is more or less unique or idiosyncratic to India. But at the same time, it behooves India to also look to its northeast and to deal with the geopolitical juggernaut that we see over there. So in that sense, we're also very much in a similar situation. But at the same time, both of our Indo-Pacific strategies also counsel us to not target any country. So how we remain true to not targeting a third country, not excluding a third country, while handling the rise of this geopolitical juggernaut, and also dealing with the idiosyncratic threat, is a task that can be likened to walking and chewing gum at the same time, but also checking your cell phone at the same time. So we have to juggle those three tasks. And the second parallel, and I'll be very brief here, is that we both aspire to be bridge builders. So, and this was abundantly made clear, I think, during Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia recently, followed by his visit to Ukraine. The aspiration to serve, to potentially serve as a peace builder on some of the most important geopolitical questions. In the case of Korea, we seek to be a geopolitical or a bridge builder between advanced countries and developing countries by leveraging our own developing experience. So what is to be done, and this is my final point. The first order of business, in order for us to really unleash the untapped potential, as the permanent secretary noted, is for us to fully realize the strategic value that we can have for each other. And the only way to really realize that strategic value for us is to have 1.5 dialogues, such as the one we're having right now, to engage in greater, more robust, high-level exchange and discussions. But also, what's equally important is to make sure that our bilateral partnership, and the ambassador mentioned the lattice work, the Taj Mahal, and our traditional architecture. Little did I know that we both have lattice work in our DNA. And to have lattice work in our DNA and to not have our bilateral partnership be embedded in other trilateral or minilateral configurations in the region is an oddity that has to be rectified. And that is why I think the trilateral Korea, US, India critical and emerging technologies dialogue that was mentioned earlier is a very good start. And that's why I believe that policy planners, with my colleague here, we need to engage in other trilateral policy planning dialogues, such as with Japan, so Korea, India, and Japan. And lastly, this is why we fully support the initiative of the embassy to host a trilateral 1.5 dialogue between Korea, India, and the United States. And just lastly, I think it would be remiss of me not to notice and take note of the significance of the term Ananta. I realized only now that Ananta means limitless. So if you say limitless partnership, that gives it gives a bad name in light of recent geopolitical circumstances. So I think one can say we truly have an Ananta partnership between Korea and India. So let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lee. I second your sentiment, of course, on Ananta. But if I may invite General Narasimhan to
Can you? Yeah. Good morning. At the outset, let me thank Ananta Center and Dr. Indrani for inviting me to speak here. And I have been also part of this India-RoK strategic dialogue in Korea in November last year. And it's always a pleasure to interact with our Korean friends who seem to have a common kind of an interest in pursuing our goals. I've just put a short presentation just to say where do we stand in terms of international relations today. The conflicts seem to be dominating the scene, both Russia, Ukraine, and the conflict in the Middle East. So what has that done to the world? One, it has affected the food and energy security globally. Second, it also created a humanitarian crisis in terms of shifting of population from one country to the other when these wars take place. And it also creates a friction amongst partners. For example, initial stages of Russia-Ukraine conflict, there was a lot of this problem that went on between US and Europe, which finally got settled down in some form or the other. And also pressure on countries to take sides in terms of, whether you are with supporting Ukraine or whether you're supporting Russia or whether you're supporting Israel or whether you're supporting Hamas. So this is something that keeps coming up all the time. And then short, intense wars are passe. Basically because we thought wars are going to be short and intense, but that has been disproved by both the wars, Russia-Ukraine as well as the Israel-Hamas campaign. What has that done to the war fighting potential of many countries is that it creates criticalities for war sustenance. You find there are reports emanating from US that it has got reserves only of ammunition of about 7 days worth of war fighting. So this has created pressure on the sustenance of war sustenance. And lastly, there are uncertainties due to regime changes. Suppose there's a lot of dialogue now going on in US. If Mr. Trump comes to power, what will be the outlook? If Mr. Biden or now Ms. Kamala Harris comes to power, what will be the outlook? And so changes in the regime also creates this. I was also asked to cover the India-China relations. This formatting is basically because of the interplay between Windows and iOS. Okay. India-China relations, I was talked to cover. I'll cover it in just 2 lines. One, I don't think there has been a major change for our position since 2024. Obviously, there have been some reports of easing certain FDA, etc., but those are going to be gone by case basis by the government in any case. But other than that, the statement that we have been making that the status of the boundary is going to reflect on the state of the bilateral relations is actually what is the status that is going to be. Notwithstanding the kind of increasing trade deficit that we face with China. That actually is basically because of certain critical sectors in which we are critically dependent on supplies from China, and that is going to continue for some time. On the second, China was talked about by my friend, seems to be the disruptor as far as science and technology is concerned. You find the advances that they have done in terms of space, in terms of advances in quantum technologies, both in quantum sensing, quantum computing, and also the quantum communication. and also the artificial intelligence and cyber. In all these things, they've got a kind of a lead which is actually troubling others and then making us to actually jog along to catch up. On China, the various actions that they have done, they do have this two oceans theory, which is roughly corresponding to Indo-Pacific, the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. And in South China Sea, you find a lot of activities done by the Chinese on busing the Australian aircrafts, close shaves with the US naval ships, and then busing of the Philippines aircraft very recently. And in East China Sea, of course, China's reconnaissance aircraft violating Japanese territory just 3 days ago. And then pressure on Taiwan and Senkaku Islands, which we see on a day-to-day basis. And Russia-PRC joint patrolling that happens in both Miyako Strait, around the seas of Japan, and also in the Korean Sea. And in the Indian Ocean region, since that is the second sea, the second ocean that they are looking at, you find an increasing naval activity coming up in Indian Ocean region. 8 to 11 ships constantly remain in the Indian Ocean region. In addition to that, you find 3 of the PLA Navy ships docking in Sri Lanka just about 3 days, just about a week ago. So these are the issues that are going to keep us actually looking at both these oceans in a very clear terms. These are the pictures of certain activities that the Chinese have carried out in both South China Sea and also in the East China Sea. And the other disruptor that is going to be is the kind of initiative that China has launched over a period of 4 years, starting from September 2020 onwards. I mean, One Belt, One Road initiative came up in 2013, but the Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, Global Civilization Initiative, and then the Community of Shared Future. In between, you find the Global Initiative on Data Security and Global Artificial Intelligence Governance Initiative. All these also feed into the proposal for reform and development of global governance. So the overarching concept is the community of shared future. And who is going to share that future with whom is the question mark. And at the moment, it appears that the Chinese are wanting to have a shared future with others who follow their rule positions in some form or the other. And what is the way forward? This is my last slide. Most of the things have been spoken about, but I think the most important one is the US South Korea India trilateral dialogue that took place on 13th of March 2024, which set out lot of directions for technological cooperation. So that I think is a very good way to go. Supply chain diversification was talked about. The other thing that we talked about in the previous strategic dialogue and still we are talking about is the Korean MSMEs coming to India in a larger numbers. And then defense cooperation, of course, again was mentioned in terms of manufacturing, in terms of technological transfer, and also in terms of sharing of information on IUU, that is the illegal, unlimited, and unreported fishing, and China's research vessels, which are traveling all over the world, and also standard setting. This is one thing I think we can really join hands to come together, because China is in a big way in influencing the standard setting, and I think we should be able to meet it. And then lastly, of course, technological, you find e-vehicles, the green hydrogen which was talked about, and more than that, the advanced materials which are going to lay down the path for the future is something that we need to cooperate on. I finish here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General. I think that was an interesting addition which we needed to put the context, the China context, in our strategic uncertainties. Dr. Song, if I may request you.
Thank you, Indrani. The two panelists have already touched upon not just foreign affairs, security issues, but also economic issues as well. So that paved the way for my presentation to be better. Well, Korea and India are getting closer to each other economically, given the economic weight of the two economies, and given the regional and global geopolitics and the supply chain reorganization. Korea and India are major economies in the Indo-Pacific region as well. The region itself accounts for 65% of global population, 64% of global GDP, and 63% of global GDP, 46% of global goods trade, and 50% of global marine trade. Well, as you know, India has been investing heavily on fostering manufacturing in semiconductors, automobiles, including electric vehicles, electric and electronics, batteries, aerospace, and defense industries. These are the areas where potentials of Korea-India cooperation are thought to be higher. Well, as for semiconductors, India has allocated a budget of $534 million for fiscal year 2025 to promote semiconductors and displays. And India is known for its large pool of fab design talent, and Korea has proven its manufacturing capabilities and is seeking new investment locations as part of its diversification effort. So naturally, there is a synergy that both countries can ride on and benefit from. For this semiconductor collaboration potential to be materialized, we need skilled workforce, first of all, and infrastructure, necessary infrastructure in place, such as clean water, electricity, and transport system. You know, I did a little bit of Indian geography study before I came here, and I thought, you know, a region like Uttar Pradesh, where they have ample water, will make a good investment location. So maybe perhaps the Indian government can give some thought about it. And Korean automobile-related companies, the whole value chain, are expanding their investment in India. India is rapidly becoming one of the key production bases. Hyundai Motor and Kia are aimed at producing about 1.4 million units after 2025, which will be twice as big as that they are producing in the United States. In the United States, they're producing about 700,000 units. So investment in automobiles is often accompanied with a big interest in investment in electric vehicles and battery. You know, such advanced technologies require continued and purposeful investment in R&D. The two countries can explore possibilities for joint R&D investment. Korea is known for its continued large investment in R&D, over 4% of its GDP, one of the highest in the world. And the private sector, in the case of Korea, many Korean companies that are already here in India, accounts for 80% of our R&D investment efforts. If you look at the story of Korea's economic development, it's really a story of institution building, human capital development, investment, innovation, and entrepreneurship. In the words of the World Bank, it's a story of investment, infusion, and innovation. So that highlights the importance of R&D activities and investment in R&D. I'm afraid India should upgrade, enhance its R&D as a share of GDP if you are to really become a technological powerhouse in the world. So I envision there is a greater room for collaboration between Korea and India in this regard. And at the same time, I see good progress at government and public sector level and also the private sector level. To realize the potential, the government level support is critical. We see more and more government level dialogue and collaboration is taking place, paving the way for more concrete and result-oriented, outcome-oriented cooperation. The ministerial level, Korea-India Industrial Cooperation committee that was actually proposed by the Korean government during the G20 summit last September in Delhi, is soon to be having its inaugural meeting. So I'm very glad that it's actually taking place. And I'm also glad that the Korea-India fast-track mechanism was launched this month to resolve investment-related difficulties between the two countries. Kudos to Ambassador Chang Jae-bok and the Korean embassy, and also the Indian authority concerned. And the Korea-India finance ministers meeting will be held soon, I understand. So layers of cooperation network among economic and business organizations of the two countries will be critical in promoting economic relations and cooperation for both countries' economic benefits and prosperity. For example, there will be a large gathering of Korean financial institutions, banks, insurance companies, and investors to meet with the representatives of RBI, India's National Investment Infrastructure Fund, Securities and Exchange Board of India, and financial authorities of India to discuss how best to invest in India. That will be taking place in Korea. This meeting is actually co-organized by the Korean Financial Supervisory Services, Banking Association, Insurance Association, etc., and the Indian Embassy in Seoul. So this is the first of its kind between the two financial industries and capital markets industry. And it's a step in the right direction. And I hope, and I think we will see more of this coming down the road. And we need more of this dialogue, government to government, public to public, private to private, and private-public partnership dialogue as well. Nonetheless, I see a weakness, a soft spot in CEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. The CEPA upgrade negotiations have been underway for the last 8 years. I think it's just way too long for an upgrade negotiations. It's time to really, wrap it up and really upgrade this CEPA. And I understand there are stumbling blocks on both sides, but why do we negotiate? It's really to find a balance and get rid of this, gap in understandings and to promote mutual benefits. And so I hope this process will be expedited by both governments. And I would also like to mention about the bilateral collaboration in cybersecurity, because India is an IT powerhouse and Korea also has a big IT industry. And with the advancement of IT industry and services, there will be naturally more cyber attacks, cyber threats. In the case of Korea, daily 1.2 million cyber attacks, threats attempted. And I think the number probably will be higher in the case of India because you are larger than Korea. So there is room for collaboration between Korea and India to deal with these cybersecurity attacks and threats. In Korea, this public agency called KISA is collaborating with countries in Asia and the Pacific to deal with the cybersecurity issue. And I think their latest project in Cambodia, no, it's Laos, I think, gives a good example for us to refer to for future collaboration. And the Korean government has increased its ODA by 40% this year, and it will again increase 8.5% for next year. And India is one of our key priority cooperation partners. So there'll be more and stronger development cooperation partnerships shaping infrastructure development, clean energy, smart farms, public health, education, human capital development, etc. And I think Korea's Economic Development Cooperation Fund can promote large-scale infrastructure and climate action cooperation with India. The upcoming Korea-India finance ministers meeting should put it on its agenda, and I think it should be already on their agenda. And personally, I hope the two countries work to strengthen not only bilateral cooperation, but also minilateral, plurilateral development cooperation for issues of common interest, to development partners in Global South. For instance, Korea, India can cooperate with Maldives for tackling the climate challenges. And I also think we see, both countries see great interest in economic security as well as, security and economic interest in countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam. So perhaps we both can, think of creating a 1.5 track dialogue with these countries. Well, people-to-people exchange is greatly important. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Song. Just to answer one of your points on the R&D, I think one of the ways India is moving is with what are called the GCCs, the Global Capability Centers, which are the new R&D centers for multinationals in India. I'm going to go to Dr. Rajamohan for the last word.
Okay, everything that needs to be said has already been said, but not everybody has said it. So let me just chip in 3 points at the end of it. One, I think I want to begin by congratulating Indrani and the Ananta Center for actually doing this initiative. Because I felt quite strongly that Korea remains an understudied, underappreciated subject in our foreign policy discourse. Of course, we have many obsessions, but I think given the extraordinary, we talk about the Chinese miracle, but before that, there was a Korean miracle, a South Korean miracle, if you will, which has seen the transformation of a very poor country into one of the industrial manufacturing powerhouses today. But yet there is not enough appreciation in the so-called foreign policy community, the strategic community of importance of South Korea. Just consider, for example, South Korea today is selling arms to Europe. If any one of us could have imagined that an Asian country would be selling arms to Europe. So it shows you the prowess of the South Korean companies. Second, I think you must also remember the South Korean companies are taking India to clean us. You might have, I see a lot of defense correspondents here who think DRDO is going to sell Tejas everywhere. But I think the South Koreans are way ahead of us in terms of their trainer aircraft, their fighter aircraft. That the impact of South Korean industry, for example, although India started building nuclear reactors long before South Korea did, today South Korea is exporting nuclear reactors. In fact, in the Gulf today, the deal with the UAE is one of the most spectacular ones. So I think it's not just studying South Korea, but I think we have a lot to learn from South Korea. I think it is not sufficiently appreciated in Delhi because we're so focused on the big countries. We don't see the extraordinary lessons that South Korea's rise on the global stage offers us. So I think this initiative that you started hopefully will take us somewhere in terms of a better understanding and better appreciation of what South Korea has done and what it is doing today, which is going to be very, very consequential. It's surprising how little we do of South Korea, given the fact that way back there was a reference to the Korean War you mentioned. India was one of the countries that was part of the coalition that supported South Korea, but soon after it just fell off our map, India's mental map, although India was so focused, one of the earliest foreign policy initiatives of independent India was on Korean Peninsula, but then it just fell off the map, and we got, shall I say, too close to North Korea, shall we say. The empathies shifted because of our own orientation in the Cold War, which was increasingly towards the Soviet Union, and we saw that actually blinded us in some ways to seeing how the rise of South Korea was unfolding in that period. Then came, of course, post-India's economic reforms in '93. We saw South Korea come back. In fact, one of the first countries to step in to deal with India's reforms, much before many countries. Our friends in Japan are still not there, but I think the Koreans were among the first to really move in a big way, and that's how we see so much of the Korean presence. So while the Korean economic presence has grown, its cultural presence has grown, but the geopolitical importance of South Korea, I think we still don't appreciate it, and I think hopefully your work will bring that out into our understanding. A second point I wanted to say was how much similarity there is between Korean Peninsula and the Indian subcontinent. Nothing is so obvious as the impact of partition. The division of Korean Peninsula into North-South, and the division of India into India-Pakistan, of course, and then Bangladesh, that the partition syndrome, which kind of intense connectivity in an emotional, political sense between people, and the political problems and the military problems that you have today, very, very deep. And I think this is something, again, we need to pay a lot of attention to understand how we deal with these issues. Yesterday, 2 days ago, I think South Korean President Yoon has unveiled a new initiative about setting up a new unification strategy and open to an offer of a joint commission with North Korea. But then, this is like the kind of tragedy of the partition countries. We keep trying, but we have to keep trying. You have no choice but to keep trying for peace. But the difficulties of getting there is so hard. But here again, I think there's a lot we need to understand each other. And then the nuclear weapons, which have given a kind of impunity to Pakistan in our subcontinent. In fact, North Korea is even better at it in terms of how it uses nuclear impunity in a manner that Pakistan might even be envious. And of course, there's been cooperation between the two of them in the nuclear field. There was some notice of it, but not enough, I think, today. And that actually demands that why India and South Korea need to do a lot more. Linked to this, the parallel lives of South Korea and India is really, both of us became very provincial in our approach. We narrowly focused on South Asia. South Korea is narrowly focused on its own region, and that the whole obsessions, the focus was so provincial, local, whichever term you want to use. I'm being a bit harsh, but the fact is all-consuming consequence of partition that are kind of often blinds us from seeing the larger dynamic in the world. But I think today, the notion, the subcontinent and Korean Peninsula are two different worlds, which is very common when we talk about South Asia, Northeast Asia. But today, I think the bigger forces are today bringing us together in ways which we had not imagined. That's part of the consequence of how the geopolitics has evolved and the question of uncertainty. The links today between South Asia and Northeast Asia today large. I know Professor Jayanti Raghavan has just done a book on South Asia and Northeast Asia, and how the impact of the change in US politics, change in the Chinese politics, is actually bringing us together into a common mode or a common regional template, which is what we call the Indo-Pacific, shall we say, that this notion, we've all grown up, at least older people here, that there's West Asia, there's South Asia, there's Southeast Asia, there's Northeast Asia, but much of this is irrelevant if you think of the larger dynamic of the Indo-Pacific, where brings together the rise of China, the rise of Korea, the assertion of Japan, and the slow but inevitable emergence of India, is actually transforming the maps, how we ought to think about this interconnectedness of Asia. And I think that's where the India-South Korea connections, and I think in future needs to develop. And I think the reference to lattice work was made by the ambassador, by you, by Indrani. In a way, actually, if you look back, just in the last 4 years, how much of a overlapping networks have emerged in the Indo-Pacific. One is the Quad, which got elevated to the level of a summit in the last 3.5 years. Then you have the AUKUS, which was a new initiative, just that was unveiled just a few months after the Quad became a summit-level engagement. Then you have the IPEF, again, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Then you have the CHIP 4. I don't know how many of you heard of CHIP 4. CHIP 4 is US, South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. For all the talk about Europe's great technological progress, all chips are made in these 4 Asian countries and US, of course. So in a way, that's again, as we look to the semiconductor wars, the CHIP 4 alliance between these 4 countries has also become an important one. And then less noticed the 2 regional institutions that have come up. The normalization of South Korea-Japan relationships. That is, we have not talked about it in India, I think, that it is, when we say South-North contradiction, probably is as sharp as the Japan-North Korea contradiction, sorry, Japan-South Korea contradiction, Japan-Korean Peninsula contradiction, because of the colonial period. And I think one of the things that's happened in the last 3 years is really an attempt to reconcile the historic tensions between Japan and South Korea. While both of them were allies of the United States, the history divided them in a very, very deep way. And I think one of the big things that's happened in the last 3 years is really an attempt to reconcile the Japanese and the Korean nationalisms, if you will, or the historical burden that has troubled the 2 countries. So that is a huge change, the trilateral engagement that has started between the 3 countries. There's also another one which came up, the so-called Squad, which is the US, Japan, Australia, Philippines, where, because Philippines today is on the front lines of the South China Sea tensions, therefore so what you're seeing is really the formation of several like-minded, mini-lateral, whatever you want to call, those kind of institutions that have emerged. This is the lattice work that we're talking about. So that brings me to the point that while this lattice work is going to be transformational, there are also uncertainties in the sense, what happens to the lattice work that is advanced under Biden administration? Will it survive President Trump coming back? Though the fact is that Quad actually was revived under Trump. So if you think there is a deep state in the US, you would think structure is as important as the political preferences of the top leader. But it's an open-ended question. But again, it's something we're going to follow. But I think there are missing links in this lattice work, which I think, especially in relation to South Korea and India, which we need to fill. One is that the engagement between Quad and South Korea. South Koreans have been very interested, but so far there's been no institutionalized mechanism. But I think we must explore potential ways in which ad hoc means in which at least some sectors where Quad can work with South Korea, because without South Korean participation, a lot of the ambitious agenda of the Quad, for example, on critical and emerging technologies cannot be fulfilled. Of course, there is the India-South Korea-US dialogue, but I think we need to find a way South Korea can directly engage with the Quad. Second, I think there was some reference to it, which is really the India-Korea-US dialogue. I mean, one is technology, but I think broadly we need to talk about the security of the Indo-Pacific as a whole. That the 3 of us, India, US, Korea. Then I would also say, given the problems with the US evolution or US future orientation, we also need an intra-Asian dialogue. That is, India, Japan, Korea. We need to talk more to each other because of the isolationist sentiment in the US, because of potential tension in the US policy between European theater and the Asian theater, between those who say, look, let's pull back, or Mr. Trump comes, he's going to tell the South Koreans, say, show me the money. So how much of that will work, we'll see. But I think what is missing, this is not, I think, Our Chinese friends constantly project the new lattice work as an American creation. It's a US-led lattice work. But I think what we need is really more intra-Asian networks, that is, especially by India, Japan, and South Korea, and Australia. We need to do a lot more between ourselves. We don't need the Americans to sit in every room. I mean, we can do something on our own. And I think that is very, very important to develop that approach, that intra-Asian approach in which South Korea as a technological power and India as an emerging market as well as a power. I think there is much we can do together. We'd also want to see more of South Korea beyond India in the subcontinent. The challenge of giving alternatives to the Chinese Belt and Road and the Chinese capital initiatives in this part require, I think, concrete alternatives that we can give. Given South Korea's own experience, Japan is trying to do some things. So I think we need to reflect on how India and Korea can bring in their expertise, work together. You mentioned Maldives. You also mentioned what you said about using water resources for data centers. I would say Bhutan and Nepal too. In fact, there's even more. So I think, how do we bring in South Korean capital technology into the subcontinent? And in partnership with India, can we offer more stabilizing solutions to the region? So that's what I would say. And now finally on defense, there's more that we need to do, but that I think would require serious internal reform within India. Today, we know the K9 Vajra was a success. That's because it's between a private sector Indian company. But the rest of the Indian defense structure is the heavy hand of the Indian state, looms very large. That we need more collaboration between Indian private sector. We've seen the emerging capabilities of the Indian defense sector, private sector. So I think we need to find ways bringing the Indian private sector. Okay, we're not going to compete with you on Tejas, but there are other things, because the story will continue tomorrow, day after. So I think defense collaboration between us, our private sector companies, I think that's the long-term direction to go. Stop there.
Thank you, Raj. You've covered a huge lot. I'm going to I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions before opening it up to the floor. Dr. Song, it was interesting that you mentioned India-RoK collaborating, cooperating in the Maldives. We've in the Maldives has recently, in the last few years, become a theater for a kind of competition between India and China. How, in your view, can we cooperate? In what areas do you think we can cooperate in the Maldives?
Well, I understand the Chinese influence is receding in Maldives. That's my latest information. Correct me if I'm wrong. India and Korea can collaborate in the climate action, like I said, because Maldives is facing serious climate challenges. And also, I think we can work on, together we can work on institution building in Maldives. I don't have much knowledge about the Maldives itself, but thinking aloud, I think these are the areas that we can work on. And also fostering workforce for their own needs. And institution building, part of me, this thing also goes to India, because I think we need. I mean, we have same problem. We have the same problem in Korea, but the problem perhaps is greater in India, that you are facing this greater need for reform of public sector to increase efficiency of the public sector institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we feel it in many aspects of our daily life. Interesting that you spoke about the two countries cooperating in a third country, because I remember during COVID, one of the things that worked was what I call the Quad Plus mechanisms, which had the Quad with Korea, Vietnam, and New Zealand in one, and Korea, Israel, and Brazil in the other, for vaccine delivery, vaccine development, and even therapeutics. These are areas which I presume we will be visiting sooner rather than later, because I don't think that we've seen the last of pandemics. All experts believe that the new pandemic is around the corner, and dealing with pandemics has now become part of our strategic future. You also spoke about, and I was particularly struck by your words when you spoke about ROK, Japan, and India as a trilateral. I think it's immense. There's immense possibilities here. In fact, that should be the subject of our next conversation. But I'm going to now open this up to questions and comments from the floor. If you could just identify yourselves, be very helpful. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, all the panelists. My question is to Mr. Lee. During your speech, there were two words which stayed with me. One, you talked about how you all want an Indo-Pacific free of bullying. And the other, you had mentioned in the beginning as to how North Korea has prevented South Korea's larger role in international relations. My question, to be very precise, is with regards to the THAAD, Terminal High Altitude Air Defense System. And in 2016, South Korea and the US wanted to install it. I believe last year the batteries were upgraded. It's not been fully installed yet, but Chinese bullying came in here and things had to be put in on hold. Now, even in your Indo-Pacific strategy, as you collaborate more with, the Quad or other minilaterals, this sort of bullying is going to happen. It's going to continue. They've displayed it with regard to the THAAD. Their civil society is still talking about, as to how the THAAD is not aimed at North Korea, it's aimed at China. So this bullying is going to continue. What is the way forward that you think South Korea is thinking of? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. And I think you're very well apprised of developments on the Korean Peninsula. Indeed, we've had our bout of bullying in the wake of the THAAD deployment that initially took place in 2017. What's interesting is that the manner in which that sort of behavior takes place differs from country to country. Soon after we had our share, we saw how Australia had its share. And ours actually succeeded what the Philippines went through in terms of their bananas and what Norway went through in terms of their salmon. But each case seems to differ. And one lesson that can be learned is that the country in question makes sure that its interests are left intact and that the vulnerabilities of the other are fully exploited. So I think those are lessons that can be learned. In terms of the way forward, you're absolutely right. With the change of administration, we've moved forward with the THAAD deployment. All the necessary prerequisites have been covered. So there's no complication there anymore. What's interesting is that their language, their narrative has changed from one of, THAAD after all was a defensive deployment. Now they're more keenly sensitized to potential deployments of missiles, so offensive missiles. And I noticed how India recently sold its first batch of missiles, homegrown missiles, to the Philippines. So how this will have repercussions has yet to be seen. What's important in terms of the way forward is to make sure that sovereign decisions are not compromised. After all, these are decisions that are being made in our own national interest, and there's no room for others to dictate what we should or should not do. So I think maintaining that principle, making sure that our like-minded partners are there with us when we make these decisions are also very important going forward.
Thank you. You had a question. If you could identify yourself.
I am Rishika Jain and I am currently pursuing History Honours from Jesus and Mary College. First of all, thank you panelists for the very intriguing and interesting discussion. My question lies to all of you that in the growing world corporations and navigating uncertainties, as we have discussed, we have Association of Southeast Asian Nations, we have SAARC nations who are working in cooperation against Chinese rise and what we consider it as neo-imperialism. So you think with the fostering bilateral relations between India and South Korea, in future we can be founding leaders of a multilateral institution or association that is going to stand against the so-called Chinese imperialism?
Who would like to take that question? Would you?
There's a problem with grand designs always. So I think, I know you're young and, big design looks very nice, but the problem in the real world is those kind of very grandiose structures don't work. So I think the fact is also all of us are also tied to Chinese economy. South Korea has that problem. I mean, in fact, when you're saying reduce the dependence with China, they're talking about bringing it down to what, 30%, because last 30 years of interdependence between Chinese economy is so deep, it can't be undone. So there's not going to be a single anti-China grand coalition. It doesn't work. Second, our own economy. China is sitting on your territory. Yet, if you read the economic survey this year, you're saying, look, if all your industry in India, wants the Chinese inputs. So that's it. These are real world dilemmas. So I think, what the Asia today is struggling is that, look, how do you manage the economic interdependence or reduce that interdependence on China so that China doesn't have an advantage, but at the same time, find ways to deal with Chinese expansionism. So these are two different things. I mean, if you say, look, Chinese are expansionists, therefore I can cut off all economic ties with China, is not going to work. It doesn't work for Japan, it doesn't work for the US, it doesn't work for Germany, it doesn't work for India, it doesn't work for South Korea. So I think this is the complexity all of us are trying to manage in the world to stop China from weaponizing interdependence in its favor. And how we do that? By building more cooperation between ourselves, but the grand design is not the way it's going to work out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Lee, my name is Dipanjan. I'm the Foreign Affairs writer for Economic Times. I was slightly different when you talked about North Korea, and there's one issue which comes up in newspapers, and when our former ambassador, who is now the DCM in Washington, she had faced this. Some of your companies and I know I'm going to talk about a cliched subject, but in companies in Pakistan, are often not found insensitive about India's, national kind of narrative on say Pakistan occupied Kashmir and other issues, and they, these dealers of Hyundai and all, they kind of give ads and on the Pakistan National Day or Pakistan occupied Kashmir. How does one create a sensitivity on this among your corporate? And I've heard from the Korean friends that, these are business decisions, what dealers do, we don't have a control over this. How does one sensitize your business houses on this? Because it does become a narrative in India among, in the current context and a growing nationalism. Yeah, thanks.
Would you like to take that?
So I'm aware of the issue, and I'm also aware that the issue is one of long-standing. It's not something that happened overnight. And I think through the various conversations that we've been having over the decades, if I'm not mistaken, I recall having first learned of this issue about 20 years ago, when Korean companies, especially in the hydraulic sector, I think it was, were setting up shop in Pakistan-controlled Kashmir. So it is an issue that we have been made aware of time and again, and therefore it is an issue that our companies and our business communities are by and by also learning to respect and to be sensitized to. So I think through the various bilateral conversations that we have, and the fact that this issue has been raised time and again, does make our companies more aware of this, the importance of respecting each other's sensitivities. And to the best of my knowledge, they haven't been expanding their operations as I understand it. I may be a little outdated in my information, but that's my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vaijayanti Raghavan from JNU. Is it okay if I just keep sitting?
Yes.
Yeah. My one observation, and one question. Observation is that post-COVID, yes, all countries are trying to, rework their relationship with various countries, largely because of the supply chain issue. And India has become a major participant in the global value chain, and we are trying to work with partners. In that sense, both Korea and India need to carry forward their SEPA, like Madam Song said. We need to expedite, work out areas where we can work, and there is a lag over there where we need to. This is one observation. But my question is that in today's paper, it says that there is Korea discount vis-a-vis the Korean companies who are looking to list their companies in the Indian share market. The foreign investors, including Indians, they are not giving them the value, they're undervaluing those shares. Why would that be? Meaning they're not getting their true value, and therefore there is an element of Korea discount, they call that. And why would that be? Meaning something like LG Electronics, which is doing so well, why should the listing be undervalued? How do foreign investors look at Korean companies? And is the question of corporate governance one of the issues that they are suspicious of? Korean corporate governance? Is that? Yes.
Well, why are you giving me a thorny question? Well, corporate governance has been a persistent problem on the part of the Korean companies, let me be very honest. But in the case of the Indian stock market, why Korean companies are undervalued? I think it's partly because, or largely because of this lack of understanding between the two countries. For instance, according to a recent survey, people, ordinary Indian people, not people like you, but ordinary Indian people, they do not know much about Korea. Although Korean K-dramas, K-pop, they're getting more popular, but ordinary people are not very familiar with Korea. And so is the case in Korea. In Koreans, not many Koreans know about India. And of course, the interest in India is growing rapidly, especially among the corporate sector people. But that's why we need to do more people-to-people exchange. I meant to say it at the end of my presentation talk, but in our Indo-Pacific strategy, one of the 9 key pillars include promote mutual exchange, people-to-people exchange. And I think that will make a lot of difference if we enhance people-to-people exchange and mutual understanding of these our cultures and businesses.
You want to follow up?
No, not a follow-up, but there's another. I'll come back later. Let others.
Go ahead. But yours will be the last, so you can make an observation after her. You go ahead. You have a question?
Yes, I
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful discussion. I am Shamoita. I am a Legislative Assistant to Members of Parliament Fellow. My question stands as the South Korean New Southern Policy, NSP, and India's Act East policy, I believe, are along the same lines. So where do you see both of these policies converge in order to ensure that we navigate global uncertainties, especially in this Asian region per se? Thank you.
I think, yeah. Look, I think you must, I shall use the word discount.
Please,
I mean,
please
discount the big slogans. You can call your policy look-east, act-east, whatever you want to call. They will call, we are coming into, Indo-Pacific. Finally, it can only be done at the actual level of economic engagement. It can be done at the level of firm level engagement, of actual investments, trade. So those are the levels at which it actually gets played out. So there is the macro headline, which is Act East and so what do you call it? Indo-Pacific
The
strategy.
southern
But
policy.
below that, actually,
Mm,
that's what we're talking about, the concrete questions of economic cooperation, the investments in India, Indian investments there. So I think that's where the things need to play. But in abstract, yes, India is looking east, they're looking west. So theoretically, there's a convergence. But the fact is, how do you translate that into specific concrete outcomes? And how do we do that on the basis of existing cooperation? How do we advance it?
So
with regard to that, I think we need to promote young people to young people exchange. That will help greatly down the road.
right, I think we've come to the end of our discussions. I'm going to just take a rapid fire, like 10-second closing comments from the panelists before we close. Dr. Song, why don't you?
Well, I think I've said it. Korea-India cooperation is critical in the Indo-Pacific region as well as for the whole global community. That's mine.
Just the 2 points which came up, one on the South policy and the Act East policy, and the other one. I think there is a tendency to convert everything towards anti-China. That is a narrative I think we need to look at it closely, basically because, like Dr. Rajamohan said, the intertwining of the countries with China is quite strong because of the economic relationships. But notwithstanding that, ASEAN has clearly said that they don't want to take any kind of side or a position. So that gives us an opportunity for both South Korea and India to work on a 2+1 mode. Like you have a southbound policy, we have a Act East policy. Can we look at projects to do together as a 2+1 is something that I think we need to look into.
My 2 cents on your question: maritime security, maritime security, maritime security. That's how the NSP has been subsumed into our Indo-Pacific strategy. So once again, maritime security. And my final point, I agree with you. Absolutely, we do need this intra-Asian dialogue. We don't necessarily need a certain country to be present for us to gather together at the same table.
10 seconds. I mean, I think we're just at the beginning because there's a lot that can be done. There's potential. So hopefully we're at the beginning of a beautiful relationship. If you can.
When are we having our next dialogue?
Very soon we have between Ananta Center, certainly we have 3 this year with Korea. That's a lot. We've got so I just remains for me to thank everybody for being here and to the panelists for a fabulous discussion. I think we've got certain takeaways that in your discussions with official India you should be able to push, which is a quad, a new quad or a new trilateral with India, Japan. Well, without the US, Australia, India, Japan, and Korea, that's a nice Asian quad that we can, or an Indo-Pacific quad, and certainly on the economic front, we not only look at semiconductors, but I would say we should look at nuclear power as well. There is a lot that can be done between Korea and India, and shipbuilding. We don't talk about it enough, but it is actually one of the engines of modern geopolitics. And with that, on that note, thank you all very much, and we hope to see you here for the next round of the India-Korea dialogue, which should be in a few months. Thank you very much.